America is a vast nation with many, many people. Third most populated country in the world. We have everything from the Amish to the transhumanist and everything in between. And people are worried about gun control right now. And I want to tell you to relax. And I want to get into why a little bit in this video. So, from the 1960s, the Central Intelligence Agency and the Tavistock Institute tried to manipulate society, and they did a pretty good job. They brought in culture creation through music and art, and they pushed a lot of young people into a system of thought through the use of drugs and sex that would topple the establishment, which it didn't. It didn't at all. What it did was it gave them a baseline for what people do and how they behave. And the Vietnam War did not end because of the hippies or the protests. Make no mistake. It was a matter of it had run its course. The United Nations had gotten what it wanted, and it was time to move on. And that's how these wars work. So when they tell you this is one thing and it's actually the other, it's usually the other. It's kind of hard to decipher. It takes time. We've had 50 years since then to look at it. And you can do your own research about that, but the point I'm trying to get at is when an agenda comes into society, whether it's the trans agenda or gun control or what have you, on the surface, it seems like there's broad support from the masses. And that's an illusion. That's complete fiction. Whether it's any of these, the media, when the media hypes it to the degree, the media is a small pinpoint of what's actually going on out there in the world. If you travel through the Midwest and most of the country, it's just there are a few cities on the West Coast and a few cities in the Northeast that subscribe to an ideology that matches mainstream media. The entire rest of the country does not. And I assure you that's the case. Find one of your digital friends in one of your places and ask them. Talk to their neighbors. But they have to go do it. They can't just assume that they know. You got to go out there and actually talk to people. And what prompted this was an article I saw about gun control. And there is a group that is pushing really hard, and they seem very powerful. But in reality, they're not. So we're going to take a look at that group specifically and maybe shed a little more light on this subject. So this article was submitted by Gun Owners of America to Zero Hedge. And the interesting part, according to March for Our Lives tax document, the group is funded almost entirely by large donations in excess of $100,000. According to that same report, only 0.5% of donations come from people giving less than $5,000, which is true. So we go over to the form. The things that are interesting here to me is this March for Our Lives Action Fund. And they're talking about us, right? March for Our Lives. They're not talking about us. They're talking about them. Apparently we have some very, very rich people with means that are pushing these agendas. And of course they should. They've got the most to lose in this. They have corporations and they have massive profits from a medical device, and they have massive profits from trans surgery on children and that whole agenda. Let's look at these donors. So they list them by how much they gave. So the first person gave $3.5 million. Second one, 1.5, 1.2, 1.2, $1 million, $1 million, $500,000. A lot of people gave $500,000, $300,000, $250,000, $250,000. A rich businessman can give a couple $100,000 if he hates guns. But regular people are not part of this. You don't have $50,000 to spend, do you? I don't either. Hell, I don't have $5,000 to spend on a cause. And I'm sure these $5,000 donations, maybe there are people who care, but where's the 50 and the 10s and the 5s? These are not regular people doing this stuff. These are the billionaire class and millionaire class trying to control society. And they have the media and they have the narrative. So they convince others that, wow, maybe everybody is against guns. Well, even if everybody is against guns, tough shit. The founders knew from living through their own experience that if you cannot defend yourself from your government, you're a slave. So the whole point of this is to, as we watch these narratives roll through, at least take a look at the idea that that's not most people. Most people don't want men dressed as women in lingerie reading books to children. Literally, most people don't want that. Most people don't want your beverage provider to promote that. Very few people I could imagine want men beating women in women's sports. That's insane. And this doesn't have anything to do with the individual person's inability to distinguish reality or their imagination that there's something they're not. This has nothing to do with that. This has to do with big picture thinking about these agendas and processes going through society. They're not real. They're real in the fact that they show up, but they're not real that they're a grassroots movement and you're bad if you disagree. Nah, screw that. You probably, if you're listening to this, you probably have a better moral compass than everybody pushing any of those agendas. So I encourage you to stay with your own beliefs, stand for what you believe, and ignore the chatter and the buzz and the morass of society's nonsense out there, just chammering all the time about rights and nonsense and all this shit. So, all right, thanks for listening. I hope this was informative or interesting or something. And until next time.